Good morning. It is certainly good to see everybody here this morning. We have quite a few visitors with us, and we are certainly thankful for your presence. We want to take a moment just to wish all of our dads out there this morning a happy Father's Day. Certainly a special day for you, and I know many of our visitors here this morning are here either to be with their father or maybe to be with their children. We're certainly glad that we can experience that with you today. Now, if you were here in our Bible class this morning, Dave mentioned our Vacation Bible School yesterday, and I would be remiss if I at least didn't talk about it for just a second. We had an absolutely fantastic day yesterday. If you were able to be here, then you recognize somewhat of a transformation in our foyer and in the auditorium here, because yesterday it was set up for Camp VBS. And it looked absolutely fantastic. If you have access to Facebook or know somebody that does, I would encourage you to go online. I think there's some pictures posted on our church Facebook page where you can see what some of those decorations look like. But we had, I don't know the exact number of kids, I would say north of 50 maybe, somewhere in that area, 30, 40, 50, somewhere in that area. We had a good crowd, several from the community that were here. We had visitors, so it was a great day. Now, if you already had a chance to look online, you might have noticed some pictures, and I don't remember signing a release form for these, but somehow they ended up on Facebook of something about a pie in the face. All I'm going to say is this. Our family went out to dinner last night at Freddy's. It was our first time to go there. We'd never been there before. If you've ever been there, then you're going to know what a concrete is, right? That's basically, I'm getting some head shakes. That's Freddy's version, I guess, of a blizzard. And the last thing I remember as I was placing the order is the lady said it was like Cool Whip on that. And then I woke up in a fetal position under the table, and that's all I remember. So I think I got the last bit of the Cool Whip out of my ear this morning in the shower, so it was just a great day all the way around. We had a great day. It was a fun time for all of us. And there were many people that contributed to it being a success, and we certainly want to express our thanks to everybody that helped participate in making what it was. Steve Farrar, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly or not, but that's what we're going to go with this morning. He's the founder of an organization called Men's Leadership Ministry. In addition to being the founder of this organization, he's also a successful author. He has authored over 20 books. One of those books is titled Anchorman. And in the opening of the book, he describes a story of a man and a woman that set out to sail the Pacific Ocean. And I guess maybe about halfway in their journey, they were on a 32-foot boat. They got a weather report over their radio that a typhoon was supposed to hit some 100 miles north of where they were. So they figured that they were far enough away from the storm that if they were to find a place to anchor off, that they would be okay. Well, they were at the Marshall Islands. It's my understanding that somewhere near the equator, if I'm not mistaken, and some of my sailors in the audience will keep me honest through this morning. So they found an inlet, and they took their boat and they anchored off their boat. They had two anchors, one at the front and one at the back, and then they actually had a third anchor in case of an emergency. So they anchored down. They thought they were safe and ready for anything that might come their way. They went to sleep, and unfortunately, somewhere in the middle of the night, that typhoon took an unexpected turn. They woke up right in the middle of the storm. Winds in excess of 90 knots. Well, you can imagine what happened. Those anchors that they thought would secure them, they broke. The storm was so violent they didn't have time to throw out the third anchor, and their ship was taken from that inlet and it was carried out into the Pacific Ocean, where it was tossed from wave to wave in the middle of this storm, and eventually it was ripped apart, and the woman actually lost her life. Steve Farrar would go on from there to say this. He would say they would have been much better off if they would have been on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, at the time of Farrar's writing of this book, it's my understanding that the Eisenhower, if it wasn't the largest, it was one of the largest vessels in the Navy's fleet. It would carry a capacity, I think the crew was about 6,000, if I'm not mistaken. That means, you can do the math, they would serve 18,000 meals a day. Now, what's interesting, though, about the boat is this. It, too, has two anchors. But here's the difference. Each anchor weighs 60,000 pounds apiece. That anchor is then connected to a chain that weighs 665,000 pounds itself. Each link in the chain is 365 pounds apiece. Farrar would then go on to use that to launch into the book to make this application. The application is this: fathers, you and I, as dads, we're like those anchors. You see, we're the anchors of our family. And the strength of us as that anchor and how we lead spiritually will have an impact when the storms come. You see, just like that 32-foot vessel that they thought they were secure, but those anchors snapped. If as men, as leaders, if we're not the anchors that we need to be, that can happen to us as well. And you know, if you think about it, that's a biblical principle. Get your Bible and open it with me to Numbers chapter 13. Numbers chapter 13. Let's read verses 1 and 2 together. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send out for yourself men, so that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, every one a leader among them. Now I want you to notice a phrase with me for just a moment. Everyone a leader among them. You and I can have confidence this morning that part of them being a leader was this: they were fathers. They had children. And you may know the rest of this story. So these 12 spies, they go out into the land of Canaan, the land that was promised to them, the land that was part of that Abrahamic covenant that they talked about in our class this morning. And the land was everything that God had said it would be, and it was even more to them in their sight. It was flowing with milk and honey, just as God had described to them. They come back, they recognize that very fact, that there's a catch. Yes, the land is great, it's beautiful, it's wonderful to be everything that we ever desired or dreamed it could be, but you see, the people of the land, they're extremely powerful. They're bigger than we are, they're stronger than we are, and 10 of the spies would say this: we can't do it. There's no way, we're like grasshoppers in their sight. 2 of the spies, Joshua and Caleb, they had that faith. They were the anchors that they needed to be, but yet the people, the children of Israel, listened to those 10 spies. And in essence, their anchor broke. And of course, as the story would continue on, as punishment for that, that generation was punished to wander in the wilderness, basically in circles, for 40 years. Until that entire generation would die off, save a handful. And the generation that was just children, when they were spies in that land, would grow up, and they would be the ones to then go in and enter the land. And that's where we pick up the passage that Caleb read for us just a moment ago. Fathers, you and I have a responsibility. We have an opportunity. We have an obligation to be an anchor. Now, let me make a couple of disclaimers to the message this morning. You might be sitting in the pew this morning, you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I'm not a father. Don't tune out yet. Don't jump on Instagram or Facebook just yet, okay? Stay with me. Because I would submit to you this morning that it doesn't matter what your role is in life. It doesn't matter the situation that you find yourself in. You can find application for the lesson this morning. I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of dads. You just look at it from whatever lens you might find yourself in at the moment. Mother, child, single, widow, divorce, male, female. Whatever situation you find yourself in, this lesson will have application to you as well. Second disclaimer is this. The lesson this morning is meant to do several things: encourage, challenge, convict us as fathers. But you might be like me. You see, each one of us is at a different point in our lives with different sets of circumstances that impact us on a day-to-day basis. And there's times in my life where, depending on what might be happening, what I might be experiencing, that I open God's Word and as I start to read, struggle. I struggle from the standpoint of, I feel like I've maybe failed in so many different ways, and I wonder in my mind, am I able to get this right? Maybe that's you this morning. Maybe that's you as a dad. Can I ask a favor of you this morning? Don't give up on the lesson this morning. Stay with me throughout the whole lesson. Stay with me to the very end. Let's just see if we can't learn together. And see if we can't grow together, okay? Let's get started. Deuteronomy chapter 4, or chapter 6. Go ahead and open your Bibles with me there. Dads, in order for you and I to be an anchor, there's several things that we need to have. And the first one is this. We need to have a recognition of who God is. Listen to what Moses says, beginning in verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. Now I want you to think about the audience that Moses is talking to here. Moses is talking to this new generation, standing at the very brink of where their fathers had stood some 4 years earlier. And what he's saying to them in essence is this. He's talking about monotheism. Think about the surrounding area, all the nations around the children of Israel as they were ready to enter this promised land. Monotheism was something that was not the norm. You know, you and I, we read this, and the concept of one God is not something that's that foreign to us. That's fairly normal. It's standard. It's a way of life for you and for me. That wasn't the case for this audience that Moses is speaking to here. And he's reminding them, as you are surrounded by all these nations that have all these idols, these statues, that have all these different gods that might be directed to different things, you remember there's one God. God is one. Not just the fact that God is one, but God is your God. He's made a covenant with you, as Dave has been talking about with us over the last few weeks in our Sunday morning Bible class. He's about to fulfill a major part of that covenant with you right now. I mentioned you and I, the idea of idolatry is something that maybe is a little bit foreign to you and me. Very few of us, if any, know an individual that has an idol in their house that they would actually bow down to and worship. But you know, if you think about the concept of idolatry, you and I still struggle with it today, don't we? Dads, think about this with me for a moment. You know, most of us, as we're engaged in raising our families, it's happening at some of the busiest points in our lives, isn't it? We're trying maybe to establish our careers, or maybe we're trying to climb the corporate ladder. We've also got our own personal interests, don't we? We've got hobbies, we've got social activities, we've got friends. As we're trying to establish our career or progress, we might even have to go back to school or go for some type of technical training. And in the midst of all those things, we're also trying to raise a family. We're trying to be fathers, we're trying to be husbands. And you see, Satan wants nothing more than to use all those things to compete for our time and our attention and to whittle away at us so that we become discouraged and we start to let that anchor slip. Moses says, you remember who's first in your life. You remember there's one God. You know, an important aspect of this is God's sovereignty. Think about Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33 where we're told to seek first the kingdom of God. The idea of this kingdom encompasses at its heart His sovereignty. He's king. He's the ruler over all. He's the one that has the right to set the standards for how you and I are to live. Think about the words of the psalmist in Psalm chapter 24 and verse 1. The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. Or how about Psalm 103:19? The Lord has established His throne in the heavens, and His sovereignty rules over all. You and I need to remember who's in charge. It flies totally contrary to what the world would have us to do. Manage your career. You're the master of your universe. You're in charge. No. Moses reminds the children of Israel, this new generation, the generation that he wants to impact not only them and their children, but their grandchildren. He says, you remember God's sovereignty. You recognize who God is. You recognize that there's only one God and He is in control of your life. As you and I need to recognize that too. With everything that we compete for our time and our attention, you and I don't ever need to lose sight of who God is. He's in control. We answer to Him. See, that leads us then into the next reality that Moses presses upon the people. In order to be an anchor, we have to recognize who God is, have a proper recognition of Him, but then we also need to have a submission to Him. Look at verse 5 with me. You shall love the Lord your God with all your hearts, with all your soul, with with all your might. Moses reminds them of this. Your obligation to God, your service to God, your worship to God, it's not out of a sense of duty. It's driven by a sense of love. But you see, it's not just the fact that we're to love God. If you go back just a couple of chapters, at the end of chapter 2 and all of chapter 3, what Moses does is he reminds them of all that God had done to deliver the enemies surrounding them to get them to where they are today. He had reminded them of God's goodness and how God had defeated these other enemies and had prepared them to be at this point where they stood on the brink of entering this promised land. You see, our love for God, our submission to Him is based upon the fact that He loves us. That He has provided for us. He has given us everything that we need. He had given this group of Israelites, this nation, this new generation, everything they needed up to this point. He's done the same for you and me, hasn't He? Last Saturday, at the Speaking of Youth Day at Hartley Bridge Road, several of our young people were there. One of the passages that we focused on is found in Luke chapter 14. You want to keep your marker there in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and just turn over to Luke chapter 14 with me for just a minute. We looked at verses 25 and 26. Now large crowds were going along with him, and he turned and he said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, and yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. You know, one of the things we talked about as a group and with the young people is this. Think about the situation Jesus is in. He finds himself here with a large crowd. That would be exactly what he would want, isn't it? I mean, as a preacher, you want the opportunity to speak in front of as large a group as you possibly can. You want to be able to share God's message. And that's the exact situation that Jesus finds himself in. He's got the audience exactly that he would want. And you would think that here's an opportunity. What would he do? Would he perform another miracle? Would he turn some more bread and fish? Would he increase them to feed them again? Would he heal someone? No. What does he say? If you want to come after me, you got to hate your father, your mother, your wife, your children, your brothers, your sisters, yes, even your own life. That doesn't even sound like Jesus does it. I mean, how do you reconcile that with all the other teachings of Jesus? Because we've got to recognize that the family, mother, father, children, that's ordained by God, isn't it? I mean, certainly Jesus promoted the importance of family. Here's the point we made to the young people, and I think it's an important application when we think about our submission to God. Fathers, think about this with me. Think about a race. And in that race are all the things that compete for our attention and our time. And maybe in this lane we've got our job, and in this lane we've got our family, and in this lane we've got hobbies, and in this lane we've got friends, and maybe over here we've got Jesus. And everyone are lined up to run the race, and the starter's over here, and he fires the pistol to start the race. Here's what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, I don't want to come in first. I want to be the only one on the track. See, that's at the heart, dads, for you and me, when we think about our responsibility to submit to God. Satan will use everything he can to distract us. He'll take all the things around us that are in the world, responsibilities that we still have that are important responsibilities. And what he wants to convince us is this. All these things are competing for our time, and we're okay as long as we let Jesus be first. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, I want to be the only one. I want to be the umbrella that everything else is underneath. Every decision you make relative to your career, relative to your hobbies, relative to your friends, you make them under the umbrella of me, my sovereignty, and what I want. Why? Because what I want is what's best for you. It'll make your relationships better. It'll make you better. It'll make you better in everything that you do. Moses reminds them, you submit to God. You give Him everything you've got, all of your being. You submit to Him out of love. Why? Because of all that He's done for you, the love that He has for you. Dads, you and I, if we're going to be the anchor that we need to be, we need to have a recognition of God. We need to submit to Him. Then there needs to be a transformation by Him. Look with me, verse 6. Moses says this, "These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart." Back in chapter 5, Moses had reviewed with them the 10 Commandments. Those 10 Commandments chiseled on stone. Moses, in essence, is saying this, yes, the law, those commandments, they're chiseled on stone, but God's intention is for them to be on your heart. Why? Because you see, as they're on your heart, they start to transform who you are. You think about those 10 Commandments, the first 4, they change our relationship to God. To those Israelites, it was a reminder again, you don't have other idols before you. Nobody comes before God. You don't take His name in vain. You remember the Sabbath day, Israelites. Why? Because it's holy. But then it changes also your relationship to mankind, the remaining 6. Not to murder, not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to covet. All these things, they're not meant to be the checklist of things that we do or we don't do. It's meant to be in the heart, Moses says, so that it changes who you are, and it changes how you interact with God, and it changes how you interact with man. Fast forward, you and me today. It's the same thing, isn't it? God's Word into our heart. Think about Paul's words to the Church of Rome, the Roman Christians. Romans chapter 6. As he would describe that beautiful illustration of how baptism is symbolic of the death and resurrection of Jesus. How, as one submits to Christ in baptism, that man that is a man of sin, as is in that water, is buried, immersed into Christ. Coming in contact with that blood that cleanses and washes away sin, that person comes up, what does Paul say in Romans chapter 6, verse 4? To walk in what? Newness of life. That old man dead, buried, new man, completely new. That's the theological way that Paul would describe it. Fast forward to chapter 12, where he starts getting into the practical application. Here's what he would say, beginning in verse 2. Don't be conformed to this world. Don't allow the world to squeeze you, to pressure you into its mold. Be what? Transformed. You've become something completely new. I've said before, that word transformed is where we get the word metamorphosis. Perhaps one of the best illustrations is a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly. You see, that's what you and I are supposed to do. As we have a recognition of God, we submit to Him, we are now transformed into something completely new, different, or changed. Dads, we're going to be that anchor. You and I are going to be that anchor that impacts our family, that impacts our children, our grandchildren, maybe even our great-great-grandchildren. You and I have to be transformed. We've got to allow God's Word to come into our hearts. We've got to allow it to change who we are. We've got to allow it to make us something completely different, completely contrary to what the world wants us to be. The world is going to try to pressure us every way it can. Satan will throw everything in the world at us. You were here for our short course with the Georgia School of Preaching last week with Dan Winkler, this past weekend. One of the things he talked about is how Satan uses sin and the fact that it's tailor-made for each one of us. Satan knows exactly what it is, as Dan said, that's going to float our boat. It might be work. Maybe you're wired that you're a workaholic and that's where you get fulfillment and you have this desire to climb as high as you can possibly go on the corporate ladder. And you and I need to be self-aware enough to know that Satan's going to come after us in that capacity. You know what? Maybe it's hobbies and interests that we have on the side. Maybe there's all these things that we enjoy and that we engage in, then we can rest assured that Satan's coming after us with those areas to distract us from our families, from our service to Him. Whatever it is for you, Satan's going to tailor-make it just for you. How do you withstand that? How do you do that? You allow God's Word to transform who exactly what Moses reminds the children of Israel. But then he says this, you and I also have a responsibility, these Israelites have a responsibility to then profess God, to tell others about it. Look with me in verse 7. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk with them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. You know, dads, you and I never need to forget that we have a responsibility to teach our children about God. It's not just mama's responsibility. It's not just mama's responsibility to be the one that takes them aside and instructs them and teaches them. You and I have an obligation to teach our children. You see, you and I have a different perspective of life. You and I, we see God from a different lens than what a mama sees God from. You and I have a different set of life circumstances, and we are the only ones that can teach our children certain things about God. What does that look like? How do we do it? Just think about everyday opportunities. Think about when they're real little and they're outside. You know, when they discover that caterpillar on the ground or that ant bed, there's opportunities for you and me just to teach them about God through nature. Maybe as they get older, and you and I, as we're engaged in work, we encounter an ethical situation at work, an ethical dilemma. Why not come home and share that situation with them and just ask them, hey son, hey daughter, how would you handle that? What would you have done? And then let's go open God's Word together and talk to them about it. Think about everything our children are bombarded with every day. Dads, you and I need to talk to them about protecting their eyes. Just driving up and down Watson Boulevard. Billboards. Read an article this week. The average age that a child is exposed to pornography is 11 years old. 11. And you know what? It's not just a problem for men anymore. It's starting to be a bigger issue in girls as well. Dads, you and I need to talk about protecting our children's eyes. We need to talk with them. We need to teach them to turn away when they see those billboards. And we need to teach them at a young age so as they get older, it won't be the battle maybe that it is for others. If we're going to teach them about protecting their eyes, we need to teach them about modesty as well, don't we? You know, dads, you and I need to set the standards for our daughters and our sons about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. If we're going to teach them to turn their eyes from a billboard for a woman or a man that's half-dressed, then we sure can't turn around and let them go out dressed that way, can we? We've got a responsibility, dads. Why? Because you see, we see the world from a different lens that a mama can't see it from. It's our job, dads, to be that anchor, to hold fast. Teach our children with every opportunity we have throughout any given day. Just think about these points on the screen. Here's Moses, some 3,500 plus years ago, standing in front of the Israelites, giving them these very instructions. Here's you and I this morning, 3,500 years later. Isn't that the same thing that you and I are called to do today? Have a recognition of God, a submission to Him, a transformation by Him, and then profess about Him to others. But you see, here's a significant difference. Moses gave this instruction to the Israelites when the promise was still afar off. You and I, we're able to see this through the lens of the cross. You see, we have a recognition of who Jesus is. We submit to Him at the foot of the cross, understanding the sacrifice He made to us. We are transformed by Him, just as we talked about a few minutes ago, through repentance and ultimately baptism. And then we share that wonderful message with others. See, dads, you and I, we need to be an anchor. You and I have the privilege, the opportunity to impact our families for generations to come. We've got to make sure our anchor is strong enough that it doesn't break. Because you see, if it breaks, that's going to impact our families as well. You know, I mentioned at the beginning The reality is sometimes it's hard. There's times that we struggle. There's times where we might find ourselves in situations where we feel like we just utterly made a mess of everything. And there's no way that we can ever be that anchor now. Too much damage is done. Let me share with you some of Moses' final words. Moses chapter 30, verse 11. For this commandment which I command you today is not too difficult for you, nor is it out of reach. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it. Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will cross the sea for us to get it for us and make us hear it, that we may observe it. But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may observe it. You see, dads, God hasn't given us anything that's too difficult for us to do. What God wants us to do in terms of being an anchor, it's not outside of our realm of possibility. It's not out of our reach to be able to do it. Does it mean that we might have to make some sacrifices along the way? Absolutely. Does it mean that maybe we don't take the next step on the corporate ladder? Possibly. Does it mean that maybe we give up a hobby for a little while? Possibly. Dads, let me tell you this. There is no greater gift that you and I will ever give our family than for them to see us submit to God's will and live it out on a daily basis. Nothing. And if you're in a situation this morning where you think to yourself, I can't do it, too much damage has been done, there's too much water under the bridge. Listen, I can't promise you that by submitting to God this morning, everything's going to work out perfectly, but I can say this. Don't ever underestimate what God can do. You just submit to God today and do your very best to live for Him from this day and every day forward. And then let God do the rest. I imagine most of us are in one of three boats this morning. We either need to make that initial submission to Him by being obedient, repenting, and confessing and being baptized for forgiveness of our sins. Or maybe we're doing that and we're trying to the best of our ability to fulfill our obligation every day and we just need encouragement and be strengthened as we do that. Or maybe we need to renew that commitment this morning. Whatever your situation is this morning, whether you're a dad or whether you're in some other position in life, if you either need to respond initially or you need to renew that commitment, we want to help you this morning in any way that we can. The Lord's invitation is open to you this morning. If there's anything that we can do to help, won't you come now while together we stand?